Hustings for North Lewis for the Scottish Parliament constituency of h-Eileanan and here. And I should probably state who I am. I'm David Green. I'm going to be fiercely neutral this evening. My interests are in local democracy as a member of Ness Community Council and in arts and culture as one of the directors of h-Eileanan, the finest little arts centre in Scotland, in Stirling. And I have a career in education. So I say that just so you know where I'm coming from. I'm not a politician, I'm not a candidate. I'm here just to referee and to try to make sure that we get the best value this evening from the people who have come here to listen and to contribute. These hustings are hosted by Clan MacQuarrie Community Centre here in Borve, a fantastic asset for the West Side and run by a brilliant team of volunteers and available for hire for weddings, birthdays, lady dances, all at very reasonable rates, just in case you're thinking of that. I'm hoping for life membership now. Our local fortnightly newspaper, FIS, has organised these hustings as part of its remarkable service to the community within the Golson estate, which is run by h-Eileanan since the community buyout in 2007. FIS received the ultimate accolade of Highlands and Islands Press and Media Awards Community Newspaper of the Year in 2024 and is very committed to local democracy, not just bringing the news, but digging out the news and making sure that this community is really well informed. I really like that prize they won. When I looked at the letters and the digits, the prize was 17 times longer than the title of the paper that won it. And it must be some kind of record. So we're here this evening in a community-owned hall that Hustings organised by a community newspaper on a pioneering and an exemplary community-owned estate, working tirelessly and effectively to improve the lives of everyone lucky enough to live within the estate area. In the year h-Eileanan bought our estate, 2007, so 19 years ago, I chaired the Scottish Parliament election hustings in Stirling. Two others on the platform tonight were there. h-Eileanan, aspiring to take the seat from Labour, and a smart young man still at Braga School, I understand, who asked the best question of the night. Alistair made a point of talking to him afterwards, asked if he was interested in the career in politics, and here is Donald McKinnon tonight. It's funny how these things go on. And 19 years was long enough for people to forget how badly I did the chairing of that particular husband, so they've asked me. We really look forward to a lively discussion tonight, being recorded in its entirety for YouTube, so everything will be recorded, there'll be no editing. So please be aware of that in the course of the evening. We have a number of questions submitted online before this evening, 14 in total, only 13 of them about the Guga Hunt. I'm sure that there will be many questions from our large, lively and very intelligent audience packed into the Clan MacQuarrie Community Centre tonight. I'll referee the event, try to make sure everyone is heard and all the candidates are given equal time to answer questions. Please remember that we're only focused on the powers of the Scottish Parliament, not the UK Parliament. Bear that in mind if you want to ask a question or to engage in discussion. We know what most of the key issues are for voters in Scotland, and they include the cost of living, health, social care, the NHS, the economy, independence for Scotland, housing, North Sea oil and gas, which is not entirely devolved, but still obviously critical, tax, which is partially devolved, tax and spending, immigration and migration, and to which we might locally add the annual Guga Hunt to Sulaskid, transport, especially ferry services, and the costs of air travel to the mainland, population, both decline and ageing, and issues to do with that, and renewable energy projects on scale, offshore and onshore, and the attendant infrastructure, which is a really important issue, particularly up and down the west side here. We have a roving microphone operating this evening. Young man at the back there, Simon, who's got his special trainers on, he's going to rush around and make sure that the mic gets to anybody who wants to ask a question. If you do, just raise a hand, I'll try to make sure that I see. But please wait until you have the microphone in your hand before asking the question. It's a difficult ask the question once. We aim to finish by 8:30 at the latest, and I will try to cover as much ground as possible because there are so many issues to consider. And I want you to go away with as much evidence as you can possibly garner from a gathering like this in making your decision about who to vote for on May the 7th, which is coming up very soon. So, I'm going to start by asking a particular question that has come from somebody who wanted to send in a question in advance. The way I'm going to do it is just to ask every one of the candidates how they would answer each question. I'm going to juggle things up so different people get to be first and last and then in the middle. And I will try to make sure that we all keep to the point and that everybody in the audience who wants to engage, to agree or to disagree, gets a chance to do that. And very happy for people to say, if things are going as they want them to go. It's not an easy thing to do from up here. So we're going to get underway. I'm going to start with that first question, and I'll need my glasses for this one, right? So this is a question that is a bit like an essay with a question at the end, but it's actually a very important and comprehensive one, and I'll read it in its entirety, and it'll give something for all of the candidates to get to speak into. So the last session of the Scottish Parliament has been a very difficult one, especially for people from the Western Isles. The ferry debacle, the privatisation of Scotland, the bow wave of renewable projects on our island council has seen its budget slashed by 18%, and we have the highest levels of fuel poverty. All these things are actively contributing towards some horrendous depopulation projections come 2050, especially to the working population. Population decline in our islands is now an emergency. Starting from the next Parliament, what specific things will you set out to achieve during the next 5 years that will actively halt and reverse the threat of depopulation? And I'm going to start by asking, go to the end there and ask Malcolm if you'd like to answer that question.
Yes, well, thank you for what I need to get closer to this. Yes, I will go for that. See how we go. Well, it is a good complicated question to try and keep in my head at the same time. But yes, what I think the ferries have really focused folks' thinking the last while. I mean, with the population decline and ageing, it really focuses things, because if we can't keep a population here, if we can't make it so that life is sorted so that it can sort of exist and make business run and things like that, then we're going to continue in the same direction. So I think that what we really need to get done is probably not the top thing, but the most pressing thing is the ferries. It has to be sorted out. I don't think that it's particularly a complicated thing. I mean, they managed to run them in Norway, they managed to run them up to Shetland and up to the other islands up there. But I think the complication of the system is probably the problem with the different groups that are involved. If we can miss out some of the people, the groups in between, then it should be fairly simple to sort out, though the backlog will take a wee while to be sorted. But then the other things I think about population decline particularly is there's probably, basically it has to be made so that people want to stay here. You want it so that people are not going to leave, and the ones that have left want to come back. And also the people, if we need skills of some description, they want to come back, and people even from the mainland or wherever they need to be taken from to take up these jobs. And that involves everything. Everything has to be sorted. The ferries have to be sorted. The housing, there has to be housing. You can't do it without housing. There has to be good jobs. And the internet and roads have to be sorted. And I think that what really needs to happen is that business needs to be encouraged. I think there's a lot of things that are getting in the road of the way businesses are run, taxes and, well, ferries and all these sort of things. And if we can get the whole of Scotland working so that it's earning money, then there will be more money to put in. And I think the other thing is to push power down to the local areas. That's one thing Reform's wanted to do, is to give the local authorities more power over their own area, you know, and to be able to raise their own funds. Am I running over time a bit here?
No, but that's a good point at which to stop. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Just from this time, we'll just keep coming this way. So, George, would you like to pick up on that?
Thank you very much, and it's lovely to be here. Thank you everyone for coming. So my background is as a teacher, and I'm also a piper, and I'm now working as an education consultant. Can work from anywhere basically now because it's all remote working, and I think that is probably a good option that we should be, you know, selling the Western Isles on, is the ability for people to come here and telecommute. And you know, make the full advantage of that side of things. But if you can't rely on the ferries to get back and forth, and I think, you know, speaking to folk, usually outside Co-op is where you'll find me, dishing out a few leaflets. But people want to be on the islands, but they do want to get off, you know, go to a concert in Glasgow, or you know, go and see relatives wherever. But to have that reliability of transport really matters. I think, you know, in the big picture, when it comes to depopulation, it's always been a classic Highlands and Islands thing. You know, my great-grandfather had 7 children, only one of them stayed behind. So, you know, it's a credit to Scotland's people that we do get up and go. But really, to encourage people to stay, I think it's that, you know, balance of getting the jobs back in, that competent, you know, ferry service, and just making sure we've got all the services here that can supply, you know, teachers, doctors, dentists, which makes people confident that they can stay here and not worry that they're going to have to spend 4 days going to Glasgow to get their teeth fixed.
Okay, thank you. Don.
Thanks, and a great opening question. And it's a question that really goes to the heart of why I've decided to put myself forward to stand in this election. I spent the last 9 years working in community development in Carloway, latterly managing the community-owned Carloway Estate Trust. And I'm worried about the future of our islands. I'm worried about the outlook for our population, its size and its demographics. And the reasons for that, which some were set out in the question there, go to things like availability of housing, availability of good jobs. What I hear is people telling me that they feel like services are going backwards, and transport links, and that's the ferry and the air service. I'll just pick up on a few of those points and things that practically I think that we should be doing. Because when I look at those problems and I look at the Scottish Parliament, I think that there are powers there that we could be using to do better for our islands. And that's why we need proper representation in the Scottish Parliament to make sure that we are using the best use of those available powers to deliver for our islands and to deliver for the future. So on ferries, we would look at overhauling the governance structure. The current system is not working and is not delivering for islanders. And what we would do is merge CMAL and CalMac into one ferry agency, with islanders represented on the board, to make sure that it is island people with interests in these islands, that are making the decisions going forward, with a proper procurement plan for delivering a fleet that will deliver the services that we need. On energy, we are seeing potentially a huge expansion of renewable energy in the islands. We need to make sure that if those projects go ahead, that we secure proper community benefit that can be invested in our local communities, to make sure that we can use that to tackle these deep-seated problems that exist in our communities. But we also need to make sure that we are unlocking the potential of community energy. And that means using some of the powers of the Scottish Parliament, but also working with the UK government as well, to deliver and unlock those grid challenges and those funding issues to deliver community energy projects in the islands. And the third point I would raise is around council funding and the situation that the Cora has faced in recent years. Since 2013-14, there has been a cumulative cut to the core budget of the Cora of £280 million. And that's in real terms, that's a staggering amount of money. That's a difference in that budget from 2013-14 to the current year of 23 million, and representing a 17% budget reduction. And the really shocking thing about this is the disparity between that and other local authorities across Scotland. Out of the 32 local authorities in Scotland, only 5 have seen a reduction to that core budget. And the next smallest one is only 7%, a 7% reduction. Next largest one is only a 7% reduction. So we have been disproportionately singled out and treated badly in terms of the funding that the Cora has received, and we need to fight for a better funding settlement that reflects the nature of these islands and the scale of delivering public services across these islands, and that's what I would fight for if I'm elected. Thanks.
Well, with the impending recession that's due to come, most people in this island will have to leave the island again for jobs. Young people. I left my first recession after leaving school, had to join the army. It's going to happen again. They carry on putting down the world to stay in the island. It's more expensive to stay in the island. Energy is through the roof. With all these wind farms, there should be a moratorium on the wind farms until we all get a share. Cheaper electricity and funds to your local council. Otherwise, you don't go ahead. It needs to benefit the local people, not the people down in England who will benefit from it. In the Scottish Parliament as well, we need to get the electricity grid back into public ownership, not owned by people in other countries.
Yeah.
That way we can get zonal pricing, which the Labour Party rejected again. Zonal pricing, which will encourage local businesses and cheap electricity for encourage industry to invest in Scotland. If it's cheaper to build things in Scotland, they'll come here rather than go down south. But without zonal pricing, cheap electricity, they won't come here. But we need our tools to get what we need out of these massive wind farms that they put up here. Ugly things, but if we don't get any benefit, it's not benefiting us. It's just spoiling the country for us, our future, our kids, and the whole of the Western Isles. We need to force them to give us something. It's not up to Westminster to say how much we will get. Local communities should. It's not going to head unless we get at least 10% or something like that. Local government plus the national, state government should have a share in all these wind farms. If we just let them build it and take all the profits away, and we'll still have the highest energy bills in Britain. It's not fair.
Okay, we can move on. Thank you, Ken. Jamie, would you like to take that one? Thank you.
Depopulation, I think the question said, is a crisis. It is absolutely a crisis. It's been talked about for years, but actually very little has actually been done about it. And what we need to do, and what I would set out to do, is take up a share in how we're going to deal with depopulation. You see the problem with depopulation has been going on all my life. For the whole of the last 70 years, the island population has been decreasing, but broadly, that brought the number of jobs and the number of people pretty much in line. But we've now got to the point where the island has begun to stop working because of a lack of population. And you can see that in every rural area in this island group, in the lack of care available for old people. If you look at the accounts of the Integration Joint Board, you will see that it has 9 operational areas, and in 2024, 8 of those they're all underspent, but 8 of those were underspent because they couldn't find the people to spend the money on. Depopulation also, you see it also, and you try to get your car fixed. 6-week waiting list to get your car in to get it fixed. It's a huge problem, depopulation, and that is the #1 issue that we have to fix. We need to find out why people are leaving the island. We need to find out why people don't come to the island to work. We need to get hold of the information from 20, 30, 40, 50-year-olds to find out why they go or why they're not coming. I can guess that ferries is one of the issues. People tell me when I go round that one of the reasons why people leave is because if they go away for a weekend to Inverness or Glasgow, they can't guarantee to get back for work on a Monday because the ferries don't run. Airfares, absolutely astronomically expensive now. £350 return to Glasgow for an airfare, even with an ADS card. And if you are expecting one of your relatives or friends to come and visit you for a weekend, they're looking at £700 a pop. It is absolutely outrageous. So there's two reasons why people are depopulation is taking place, which we must fix. But I'm only guessing that these are the reasons. What we need to do is make the island a go-to place for 20, 30, 40, 50-year-olds to come and live. Make it the sort of place people want to come and live in, and the people who are already here to stay in. We need new businesses. What sort of new businesses, you might say? Well, we are currently looking at an absolute bonanza in electrical power. Now, before I go any further, let me say I am absolutely against N4. But there's lots of other power going on, and we can make hay while that sun shines or that wind blows for as long as it does. We can use that power to run industries which require lots of electrical power. We've never culturally had that in this island. We've always been fed by electricity on the end of a long, straggly bit of electrical string that comes up through the sky and frequently fails, or else diesel generators in Stornoway. Here we're going to have an absolute bonanza. The generating systems that are currently on plan amount to 2.3 gigawatts of power. The cable that's been put in from Arnish to the mainland is 1.8 gigawatts. That's 500 megawatts left for us to do something with. We need to do something with that. Hydrogen manufacture is one that sticks out as something we should follow up. The mainland will need hydrogen, and Germany is crying out for things like hydrogen because it shut down all its energy supply lines from Russia after the Ukraine war broke out. So there's a huge market there, and there's actually a hydrogen pipeline envisaged to go from somewhere around about Dublin, I think, up through the Minch, around the north of Scotland, into Peterhead to feed hydrogen into the gas grid in Britain. It passes only 5 miles outside Stornoway Harbour. Making hydrogen in Arnish, we can send it up in that pipeline. There's an opportunity.
And I think we should, that probably enough to be getting on with next thing.
All right.
Move on to Alice Binion. Thank you.
Thank you. And it is not a good question to open up on, but the central question really to everything else, and everyone else relates to it. The questioner, I think, was asking primarily about solutions. So we know what the problems are, and if I can concentrate on a few solutions as I would see them. Housing, to me, is the single issue that probably people have come to me about most in terms of expressing frustration about not being able to live here. And that frustration can come from people who are trying to buy a house or trying to rent a house. So the SNP and government has, across Scotland, built 100,000 affordable houses, and we are in this election pledging to do that again. What we need to do is make sure that the social rented housing is available across the islands. There's nothing wrong with building houses in Stornoway, but unless we build affordable houses in the other parts of the islands as well, we're actively drawing people out of rural areas and into Stornoway. So we need to get that balance right. George rightly mentioned remote working as something that we should be aspiring to in the future. However, we need to be careful that we don't reverse the polarity on that, as it were. So we don't have people sitting in Glasgow or Edinburgh or the other side of the world administering public services in the Western Isles from their spare rooms. There need to be houses here for people to live in who are going to do work if it's work online. So housing is central to everything, I think, in the coming Parliament. Ferries, I'm not going around the doorsteps attempting to justify the situation of ferries. You can believe me, that was certainly true when I was in USD Barra recently, and it's certainly true here too. I would say, however, that anyone, myself included, who comes to events like this and claims to have some instant solution other than building ships, is trying to have you on. Yes, there's things I accept that need to change about the culture of CalMac. But the only way out of this is building new ships, because the average age of the CalMac fleet is now so ridiculous because of lack of investment over a period of 25 years. So building ships, the Scottish Government is doing. There's 4 building just now and more on order. But that's the only solution to that problem, and I want to be very honest about it.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Alistair. Thanks everybody for their answers. I'm aware that this was the first question. It was a complex question, and it took quite some time for everybody to be able to engage with all of the issues embedded in the question. But we've got off to a start, and we've covered all but 3 of the issues that I listed earlier on as being key. So I'm not surprised at that. That was a question that came from somebody who wanted it to come prior to the meeting. To the Hustings. Is there any question amongst the audience here that we could go to next, either based on what you've heard already or based on something completely different? There's somebody here who's going to wait for the roving mic before he asks a question.
Hello gentlemen, you know who I am. For those of you who don't, my name is Don McLeod, I'm from We Debates. One of the interesting things that I noticed from the answers there is that there is definitely this pendulated swing of how much control, be it of economic and social developments, can go from Holyrood to here. A couple of years ago, Shetland unsuccessfully...
Is this going to be a question, or are you making a statement?
No, I'm making a question, just give me a minute.
Right.
Shetland
question has a question mark at the end.
I understand. Shetland unsuccessfully tried to put forward an autonomy, the idea of further autonomy to their isle. So my question is, do you think the time is now maybe right to consider that question as well for the islands of h-Eileanan and here?
Okay, thanks for that question. I think it's a very clear one. We'll start with Kenneth. Would you like to start to answer that question? And we'll make sure you get the mic. Thank you.
To be honest, having our council run the islands totally independently from the Scottish Government, I think it's ridiculous at the moment, because they're struggling to work things at the moment, and the funds have been reduced, cut. So the only way they can raise funds themselves is to raise taxes, and no one wants that. I don't believe it would benefit. Once the country's running smoother, we're not close to a recession, maybe, but when we're looking down the barrel of a recession, to go independent, running our own island, I think it's a daft idea. Sorry.
Okay, and if we could go now, Jamie, would you take that on next?
I certainly didn't really hearing what the actual question was. I think it was, have we got the right balance of getting more things delegated to the Western Isles, is that right?
Well, just maybe, do you think that maybe from Shetland's perspective, although unsuccessful, that the question of more autonomy even...
I can't speak for Shetland because I don't know what's happening in Shetland.
Do you think it should happen here though as well?
But I can speak for here, and I think that there is quite a lot that can be done here on the island. It's not so much a question of making the island independent to get on with it by itself, but you can't get solutions to island problems, Western Isles problems, from Edinburgh. The solutions to Western Isles problems have to take into account people with Western Isles experience. So therefore, the boards of the various public companies, such as CalMac and its various different legs of manifestations of CalMac, need to have islanders on those boards. The Western Isles Health Board needs to have people from the islands on the Western Isles Health Board. Highlands and Islands Airport also could do with islanders on that board too. So that's one way you can initially get started on getting more engagement with the realities of what happens in the Western Isles, and get that put into place and not depend on a bunch of Quango people in Edinburgh to make all these decisions on our behalf without the full experience and lived experience of what the Western Isles is like.
Okay, thank you, Alison. Pick that.
So on the point firstly about Shetland, I think I know it's been referred to here, the controversy in Shetland about the fact that the community control that they expected to exert over the Viking project didn't come to pass. So there are definitely lessons in that for communities such as our own and other parts of Scotland to make sure that, I think for instance, there should be a mandated community benefit for all these big projects. It shouldn't come down to individual communities having to negotiate one every single time. That, of course, is a reserve matter, so it would involve conversation with the UK government. But certainly one I took up when I was Minister for that area of policy. Probably the biggest frustration, though, and I take the point to be made about not having all these things run by Quango in Edinburgh, I agree with that. But the real frustration when it comes to energy is that Scotland is not allowed to make any energy policy. So the real frustration is that the things that really afflict people in places like here in the Western Isles, such as the unit cost of electricity, are things over which Scotland gets no say because the UK government will not let us. So if we're going to have solutions to these problems, then Scotland has to have powers to make changes to deal with, as I say, the cost of electricity, which is half the price in most of our neighbouring countries, to allow Scotland to make big decisions about getting the benefit of renewable energy, and to make sure that the communities that host it get the benefit too.
Okay, and move over to Donald.
Thanks for the question, Donald. I think on this one, what comes to me first of all is thinking about the 19 years that we've had of SNP government and the nature of that government in being one that has centralised power in Edinburgh, taking power away from the islands over a period of time. And I think that's something that I think we need to reverse. We need to make sure that we are empowering our communities, that these public bodies that wield so much power now over our lives here in the islands, as others have said, must have island representation on their boards. But we also need to look at their actual role in and accountability in the services that they're running and delivering. So I do believe in more power being devolved to the islands and to local areas. But I also think that this question also makes me think about the empowering of local communities as well. And I think that communities can do amazing things when they are given the resources to achieve that and given control of their own resources. It's something that I've seen in my previous work, and I think it's something that we're all too aware of here in the islands. But we need support to do that, and I think that's where the Scottish Parliament can come in helping to deliver that for our islands in the future. Thanks.
Okay, pass on to George.
Thank you very much. Well, certainly as a unionist, I would have some scepticism towards greater autonomy, but obviously as a conservative as well, I very much encourage putting much more power down to the local level. And I think, 3 examples. We talked a bit about renewables, where it's things like there's 350 million made in constraint payments, that's throughout the Highlands and Islands, but only about 30 million is paid in community benefits. So the Scottish Conservatives are planning to introduce a community veto if enough local people object on those big renewable projects. Secondly, I think on a sort of second level, trusting people, it's a bit like with crofting. There's a lot of legislation around crofting, and I feel like certainly Tim Eagle, MSV, my colleague, fellow candidate, has helped. The idea of sort of stepping in to step back. So trying to streamline some of the legislation, improve it, and then just let crofters get on with what they do best. And I'm sorry to bring it up, but the Guga as well, you know, there's a lot of, I think the candidate for the Guga is standing in Edinburgh Central, he's not standing here. I think, you know, people here know what they're doing, let's just let them get on with it, really.
Okay, thank you. And Malcolm?
Yes, thank you. Yeah, it's one of the things that is important. A lot of the, as I say, Donald mentioned it, the centralisation of decisions that come down from the likes of Holyrood. Different areas, different places have different requirements. Our one is depopulation, so that the needs for a different area can be very different. And one of the policies that we have is to increase the powers that go down to local authority, just the more control over it, and also to try and make the funding collected a bit more locally, which would give a sort of more predictable amount of funding each year, knowing a wee bit more about the budgets. But yes, I mean, on these large projects, especially the ones off the coast, I mean, it's a mixed bag, because some of the community, you see the community wind farms, and they do, they do a lot of good for the community, and there's a lot of work goes into them, and there's a lot of community cohesion happens through them. But these large projects off the coast particularly, but there seems to be a want to put them on land as well, and a lot of these things are being railroaded through. And though some would say that Westminster has all that power, there is power in the planning is to a sort of local area. But if there aren't any people objecting to it, it's just going to get washed through. So it is important to have as much power here, and to have and to be able to discuss lots of subjects that are difficult to discuss. I mean, it goes to the sort of the net zero stuff as well. You know, we're under pressure to accept that has to be done. Where it's just a very expensive way of running a power system. It gives very little power to the local area. In fact, most of the power is going away, the money is going away, and it's costing the country a fortune. So I think there needs to be given power to the local area for dealing with these sorts of things, because we just about got walked over with the last one when they were wanting to do it right down the centre of the island. But so then they just come back with another project just a bit bigger this time. So yes, I think it needs to be done. I think it should be done, and I believe that with a bit of opportunity given to reform, I think they will push power down to the local area.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you everybody for your answers there. We've had quite a range of responses to that question, and that's been very interesting to hear them. Does anybody want to pick up on any of that particular issue? Hang on just a minute. Yeah. Oh, and something I should have said at the beginning. I know a lot of people in the audience, but I'm not going to use names, because people whose names I don't know feel excluded then. So I'm going to pretend that I don't know anybody. Were you going to ask a question about this particular issue, or make a statement about it?
It's to do with the answers that we
Okay, do you want to take the mic?
It's interesting how many politicians... Sorry? Sorry, I'm on now. It's interesting how many politicians are very lazy when it comes to their answers on what they refer to as renewable energy. Because renewable energy covers a multitude of different things, from wind, which obviously there's a lot of objections to because of the environmental destruction that it causes, and the short-term life of it. A wind turbine might last for 15, 20 years, when other renewable energy sources like hydro have been available for a lot longer and are far more controllable and far more instant. And the lack of investment in hydro has been a problem, where Scotland could be generating a dramatic amount more. In fact, one power station that a Scottish civil engineering company built in North Wales produces 1,800 megawatts within 7 seconds.
Okay,
Which
I'm going to stop.
the question is, The question,
Do you have a question?
the question is, how many of you will actually fight against the 70 square kilometres of wind turbines being built off the Borve area?
Right, well, we'll do a show of hands is always good when doing it. Who would fight against this? We have yeah, well, in a crude and not very complicated way, a number of people would, and it's a very big issue, it's a very pertinent issue, and I'm sure we'll be coming back to it later on as well. I'm going to move on. Oh, sorry, there was a question over here.
I was just going to ask, which of them support net zero as a policy?
Okay, it's a question here about net zero and whether people support net zero as a policy. It's in a number of manifestos, but not finding in all of them. I shudder to do this by show of hands again. Anybody prepared to put their hands up to net zero as a simple and crude measure?
They support net zero.
Yeah, well, that's half of people.
I think you should name who supports it.
Well, I'll give you my name, it's Alison.
No, but you said a few support it, and also the ones that support N4, where Don McKinnon and Alison are.
Okay,
That's not what the question was.
we're just going to wait just a minute. Alistair said he'd like to respond to this question here, and then we'll come back to that.
So there was an awful lot in that between the two questions. Firstly, on expensive power. I know we've had a conversation in the past, I think, about nuclear power. There is a nuclear power station in the north of England, Hinkley Point, which is now costing more to set up than Scotland spends on health and police and education in the course of a year. And I know that, but we've had conversations about this wider issue about net zero. So I think that net zero is real in the sense that we have to get to net zero or the planet will continue to warm. How we do that, of course, is a different question. That's why I was suggesting it's slightly more nuanced. So not every renewables project that comes forward will be the right one. Communities have a right to object to them. But I think the position that Reform and the Tories are trying to put, which is somehow we can just call a halt to all new renewables projects, is flying in the face of the fact that the demand for electricity will go up. Having said all of that, I have put myself on the record in the past, and not everybody thanked me for doing it, for saying that I think there is one renewables project on the west side of Lewis which is so contentious that I think that the bar has been reached for there to be a public inquiry as part of that planning process.
Okay, thank you. Now, Alistair's responded to that, so I think we need to give other people an opportunity to that. Jamie, you want to say more about that? Yeah, sure. Yeah. And then Donald after that.
Yeah, I would agree with what Alistair said there. We do have to get to net zero, otherwise the planet is going to overheat. And I don't think that's really anything I would really want to. I think it's in contention really, but that's what's happening. We do need to head in that direction. That there is something we need to talk about, and as Alistair said, that's rather nuanced. I'm not against nuclear power. I used to be a nuclear engineer, and modern small modular reactors are considerably more effective and cheaper and safer than anything that's gone before. They're also really quite tiny, but I'm not suggesting for a moment that we're going to put nuclear power stations in the Western Isles. There's all sorts of reasons why not. But we do need to get to net zero. We can't not aim in that direction, but not every renewable source is viable, and as I already indicated, N4 is not. It's gone the wrong way. There are aspects of it that can debate the detail, but I don't think we won't spend the time doing that.
No, definitely not. Thank you. Donald first and then Malcolm. Yeah.
Thanks. Yes. On net zero, first of all, I think we do need to reach net zero. The question is about how we get there, and what we need is a just transition that takes people with us, that supports workers and that supports communities as well. Climate change is real, and it's something that we need to tackle, and it's something that we all need to take seriously. On N4, there is a consenting process underway just now. I think it is really important that the community engages with that. There's an opportunity to submit feedback and an opportunity to engage just now in a way that people didn't really get the opportunity to engage when the decision was taken to licence that area by the Scottish Government. And that's something that I think can be called into question, why that area was selected. It is very close to shore, but I think we have to wait until the consenting process is concluded to find the outcomes of that. But it is very important that people engage with that process and submit their views and make sure that the community's voice is heard around that. If these projects do go ahead, it's really important that we do maximise community benefit from those. I've already done that in my past work with the Reserve of Carlisle. I was involved in securing the £4.5 million a year community benefit fund over 35 years, index linked. That is in no way support for the project. Quite the opposite, in fact. It was a piece of work which accepted that these multinational corporations which have ended up with the licence to that site weren't going to give us anything off their own back. We had to go out and fight for it, and that's what I'll continue to do for this community.
Okay, we'll pass on to Malcolm.
Yes, the net zero is definitely a question. It costs us an awful lot. It's going far too fast. People say that there is climate change. I absolutely accept that, but it's a pretty natural thing that happens. There's plenty of folk will argue that it's not man-made. The carbon has been a lot higher in the atmosphere than it is now. We're almost at a dearth of carbon. So I think there's that issue, but there's also the issue that we're such a small proportion. If the UK was to stop it, we're 8%. We produce 8% of carbon. 0.8%. If we stopped it all and gave up all our jobs, it's not going to make any difference anyway. The other countries, in China, Russia, whatever the countries are all going for it. They're using coal, they're using gas, the United States. So we're going to be with no jobs. We want folk to be able to stay on the island. We need to be working on oil, we need to be working on gas. There is room for renewables where they're actually cost effective. I don't have a problem with that. I was brought up with small wind turbines and things like that. I was taking recordings when they were doing research, and I don't have a problem with it, but if it costs us our living and costs us the ability to live on the island, it's a lot of cost for very little gain. So a wee bit different, perhaps.
Okay, thank you. Right, did the other two want to come on that particular issue? Kenneth?
Yes.
Well, first of all, with all these wind farms, I think it should be compulsory, especially in small islands, that the hydrogen production be compulsory. If these wind farms are over a certain size, that will give the island cheaper fuel for cars, for heating, because Scotland doesn't even have a refinery anymore for fuel. Hydrogen is the way it's going, but if these things aren't integrated, wind, hydrogen, and the existing oil industries, will just crumble away to nothing, and China, you can say China, India, will carry on polluting, and will be charged more and more for less and less.
Okay, thank you. And for the previous, George, do you want to come in on that?
Just a few words. I think it's, Conservatives aren't against, wind farms and things like that, but we certainly, Helen Crawford, my other MSP candidate in Loch Arbor, Bay Knock and Skye, is very much calling for a moratorium on these being built. And as I said, we want to give a veto to local communities over them. But I think it's, it's like, I gave up meat for a while, and you know, it's great to be a vegetarian, but I found I was getting hungry, I was losing weight, and I think it's a bit like that with the energy mix. You've got to have the full range of everything that's going on, and not kind of limit what the country's economy is capable of.
Okay, thank you very much. Well, that's everybody responded, and I'm going to move on to a different issue now, even though I realise that this is a very complex issue, and we could take up the rest of the evening on it. But we are halfway through the evening already. I know time flies when you're having fun, but we'd like to get quite a number of other points in and on different topics. So I'm going to move to another one now that was sent in advance. It's not unconnected to this one, but it's a bit more precise and focuses on an issue which is very current and particularly problematic in rural areas of Lewis and of Scotland generally. So during the period of next Parliament, 2026 to 2031, what specific goals are you going to set for addressing fuel poverty in our islands, especially for the existing housing stock? How many green tanks of heating oil will you target reducing the use of in the north of Lewis? That's two questions. But I think everybody on the stage here can cope with two questions. And I think this one, well, George, would you like to start off on this one, please? So it's two questions. What would you do to address fuel poverty? And how would it be manifested in terms of reducing the current dependence on heating oil?
Yeah, it's a tough question, I think, and you know, I've already seen areas where they do have heat pumps or solar heating their houses. You know, it's not too expensive to install. Is it necessarily massively cheaper? Not really. You know, is what I've heard. And often you sell off what you basically in winter you have to pay, and then in the summer you earn a bit back to kind of cover the costs. So that is a way of doing it. Is it going to completely solve things? I'm not quite sure. Maybe it comes back to this idea of using renewable energy from wind farms to reduce the cost of our bills. Comes to oil heating, I think certainly at the moment, you know, Scottish Conservatives are very much keen to get drilling again. I don't think there's any reason. It is the most effective way of heating houses here. So I think for the moment, I'm certainly backing that. But if we do want to wean ourselves off oil, and current fuel prices as they are, it certainly gets me thinking about buying an electric car potentially. But what we've really got to do is, you know, think about that complete transformation of the energy system, and certainly some of my fellow candidates here alluded to hydrogen and things like that. That could be an option.
Okay, thank you. Malcolm, do you want to address that?
Yeah, I could say a little bit on it, I think one of the things that, like I said, it is a good way of heating houses in the area. It's all very well saying heat pumps and things like that, but one of our things that we're known for, and certainly have been, and maybe it's improved a little bit, is power cuts. And oil usually, you know, there are ways where oil can work even when there is a power cut, but heating with electric is not going to work. I think we say about the price of fuel, I think there is not a fuel cap price, a unit price on domestic oil, so that might be an area for bringing that in, so the rural areas are left more exposed to these things. But I think drilling for oil and increasing the amount of oil that's coming out, though it doesn't come directly to us, we do gain from the jobs, the taxes that can be paid on the export of oil, which both would give us an increase, well, a more of a buffer from the oil prices. So I think that's probably, yeah, what I would like to see is a wider thing of drilling, and which buffers us from the oil prices, but also something locally would be good as well.
Okay, thank you. Donald, you have to remember, so there's two questions here. One is addressing fuel poverty, and the other is reducing the reliance on domestic fuel oil.
So I think the two questions are very closely connected, and I think when we first thinking about the powers of the Scottish Parliament, I think we need to think about around retrofitting of houses and making sure that we're bringing houses up to a standard where their energy efficiency is much higher. And one of the things that I think is really important when we do that is that those approaches are island-proofed. That we've seen in the past where approaches have been taken that have maybe looked for a gold standard of end result that hasn't been achievable, and we need to make sure that any schemes that are delivered are actually achievable in the island context. And once houses are retrofitted and brought up to a certain standard of insulation and windows and air tightness, then it makes it much easier to transition to electric sources of heating. And the use of air source heat pumps, which when installed correctly into the houses that have been retrofitted, and particularly into new built houses, can see really good results. I understand that people will have had some, I heard of some poor experiences with them in the past when these issues haven't been addressed. But that's also connected to where we need to work across the UK, and where the UK government comes in pushing down the unit cost of electricity. And that's a challenge. The money came off bills in April, but we need to make sure that we keep pushing that down, keep pushing the price cap down, and making sure that we tackle the cost of living that way and end fuel poverty in these areas.
Okay, Kenneth, would you like to comment now?
Obviously, without zonal pricing, there's very little that you can do out in islands. You're stuck with, you're paying what you're told you're paying. We need to force zonal pricing through. And once zonal pricing through, things become cheaper for everyone. But in island communities, if the powers to, the race for hydrogen production, if that was like council owned, that would supply the island with cheap fuel. You wouldn't have to tank it in. You're not relying on mainland farms for transporting to you. It would make the island more self-sufficient, which will be more economical. But without zonal pricing, very little you can do to adjust any fuel pricing.
Okay, thank you. And Alistair, will you come next?
Yes. Okay. Yeah, I think firstly on fuel poverty, this has been, I would accept, one of the most persistent problems this community has ever faced through the years, and there's reasons for it that everyone know about. The distinct housing types here, many houses like my own built without the aid of builders, many houses in sore need of insulation. So what can be done? I suppose I would point to what the Scottish Government has already done, and the number of houses in the Western Isles that have received insulation as a result of the Scottish Government funded schemes there. But the other thing that can be done, and has been done, is to electrify heating. And it's quite a surprising statistic when you consider that almost all houses in the Western Isles are off the gas grid. And we have the highest use of oil, or one of the highest uses of oil anywhere. We also have one of the highest, or the highest, I should say, number per head of population of heat pumps of any constituency in Scotland. So something is happening right on that. But the big disincentive, of course, I mentioned it earlier on, but I'm going to mention it again. The big disincentive to people moving to electric forms of heating is the unit cost of electricity, which is insanely pegged at the cost of a unit of gas. It's not done in our neighbouring countries, that's why their electricity is half the amount, and that's why they all heat their houses with electricity. In the meantime, I suppose the flippant answer to the first question is to point to the fact that I was the minister who stamped on the idea of a ban on peat stoves.
Okay, thank you. And then Jamie, just to finish up, thank you.
Yeah, well, everybody's obviously been very busy out on the campaign this week, because nobody so far mentioned the fact that the Labour government earlier on this week announced as its own the idea which Ed Davey for the Liberal Democrats put forward a year ago, which is to break the link between the price of gas and the price of electricity. And that is the key to reducing the electricity price, and it's the cost of electricity which is what really causes fuel poverty. So there's a bunch of other things that are in the Liberal Democrat manifesto for Scotland, which I would just draw your attention to. And first of all, is the emergency insulation programme, which is would be initiated if there was if the Liberal Democrats won power. And the other aspect of that is fairer heating bills, doing exactly really what you've talked about, of doing something about the fact that we here pay the highest charges for electricity in the United Kingdom, I think is what I'm right in saying, and yet we produce so much of it. There's also a mandate in the Liberal Democrat manifesto that every new house would have solar panels on its rooftop as part of the original build. And on the subject of community benefit from these new developments, it is a Liberal policy that it will be mandated that about 5% of the output of wind farms and other kinds of renewable projects will be shared between the Corla and the host community.
Okay, thank you. So I think everybody's now had a chance to answer that question, or the two questions around that fuel. Does anybody in the audience want to pick up on that issue? And in the sense of asking questions, I think, rather than, we're here to hear what the candidates have to tell us, rather than to instruct them. So yes, if you'd like to certainly wait for the microphone.
Yes, on the second question, I don't believe most of the candidates didn't answer. I know the heating oil prices is reserved to Westminster, but I think it should be controlled by the Scottish Parliament.
Well, I think heating oil is the one thing that isn't controlled by anybody, and that's the market, and it's problematic doing anything about that. But certainly something which reduces the costs for people living in rural areas particularly would be necessary to do what the second part of that question asked, to reduce the number of, wouldn't address the number of oil tanks, but it would help people for whom there was currently no alternative.
If the price of electricity was controlled in Scotland, that would incentivise people to use oil, potentially.
It would indeed, yeah. Okay, anything else on that particular topic? So either fuel policy generally, if you want more detail from anybody about what they said, or on that issue of moving away from what seems to be the over-reliance on oil, particularly because of the cost of oil relative to other forms of heat. No? Okay. Oh, sorry, there is somebody at the back. Yeah.
I just wanted to ask, not one of you mentioned what's going on globally, and I know this is for the Scottish Parliament. However, the oil shock from the Iran-US-Israel war is going to hit us hard. It's coming. It's not just here, it's coming. And so won't that put a huge pressure on the use of oil? I mean, there is a possibility that the oil will literally run out. I mean, there are many countries already who are closing schools for a day at a time, making people work from home. Thousands and thousands of flights already cancelled. So I was just surprised not one person even made a passing note of that, and yet surely it's something about these islands and that we need to be self-sufficient because this is going to go on for years. This is not going to go away in a few months.
Yeah.
And
okay.
then the second shock to that is obviously agriculture and problems with growing food when you don't have enough fertiliser.
Right.
So I just thought maybe
I think
mention
everybody was responding to two very specific questions about fuel poverty, and I think all of these candidates have offered to solve all of the problems that we all face in their manifestos. None of them is offering to solve a global crisis. No, there is no time. No. Okay, but thank you for that intervention. Yeah. Okay, now is there a question from the audience that you would like to have every member of the panel give their answer to? Yeah? There's some, would you wait for the microphone?
Can this be a question not related to the previous questions?
Absolutely.
Yeah. I'd like to talk about the NHS. I would like the candidates to talk about the NHS. I think it's a concern to many people, the underfunding that has taken place during Conservative governments and part of Tony Blair's government, which has severely depleted the services. That said, it's still a wonderful service, one which I've been lucky to have in place during my life, and I would like to think that it's there for my descendants. Can each candidate give a brief explanation as to how they will support the NHS moving forward, and in particular, I don't like to single anyone out, but I'd be particularly interested to see how the Reform Party would respond to whether or not they intend to privatise and send us all down along the American route, whereby most of us won't be able to afford healthcare and we'll have to die without being able to afford our prescriptions.
Okay, so if I can try to summarise that, there's a question about how each party would support the NHS into the future, and although there was reference to UK government, we all know that it is a Scottish government issue, and that's what they will address. And then there's a wider issue about whether privatisation of the health service is going to be developed in the future, or is in the manifestos of any party. So we'll give everybody the chance to answer both parts of that. And we'll start with Jamie for the Liberal Democrats.
Well, the NHS was, the Liberal Democrats are a party of care and very much pro the NHS as a national function which is free at the point of need. The things which are in our manifesto for this forthcoming election, which affect this, are a wider, increasing the range of staff in areas where we're short at the moment. So mental health provision, physios, and that will add up to around about one extra person per GP practice across Scotland. So that's one thing. A fairer deal for rural healthcare, lung screening, dentists. We can't get on a dental list in the Isle of Lewis at the moment, and there are no dentists in the Southern Isles at the moment. That is atrocious, and it's actually a failure of management that has happened. I know that they've gone through all sorts of difficulties with getting people to come to the island, but the fact that it has not happened is a failure of management, and that needs to be rectified. We're looking at a walk-in mental health service, so people who have thinking they're having a problem with stress or whatever can walk into somewhere and talk to somebody professional about it. One of the problems with the NHS is to do with stop and start financial planning and manpower planning. And we were initiating a 10-year workforce plan for the NHS and for care. The two are very much linked together, of course. One thing that we need to go for is a 7-day discharge policy in the hospitals, so that you don't get people stuck in hospitals when they don't need to be there. That currently costs about £1 million a day in Scotland for people who are in hospitals but don't have to be. Carers are absolutely key to being able to unbung the NHS, and we haven't got carers in this island. Unless you're in Stornoway, you need more than one point of care a day. You can't have it in the rural areas because we haven't got the people. And that is partly to do with funding, and we would increase the pay rate of carers by £2 an hour and make caring a proper profession, the proper professional standards and national pay bargaining for the overall salaries, which we would support the results of that pay bargaining. Young people, young carers, there are youngsters who are looking after older relatives and also trying to be at school and in education. And we would provide additional people for them to turn to when they're in difficulties. And we will also increase the carer support payment up by £400 a year. And the other thing is initiating a program of proper program of preventative health, so people don't have to go into the care service or the health service in the first place.
Okay, thank you very much. Yeah. Kenneth, if you want to come in next.
Well, I believe that the only true way to protect the NHS is independence. With the resources available to Scotland with full independence, you could triple, quadruple the funds available to NHS, build more hospitals. But at the moment, we're going to strip down, privatisations creeping in, and we're getting less and less funds available to the NHS. So the service will continue to crumble. Without independence, we won't keep the NHS. It'll be privatised before you know it.
Okay, thank you. Alistair, we'll come in on the first part of that question and the second if you want.
Okay, well, first of all, I think everyone's agreed that the NHS is the most cherished institution that we have in the country, much more cherished certainly than politicians, and it's a huge asset for us. The point that was made, I think I'll respond briefly to the point that was made about carers, and this comes back to the point I keep going on about all the time about housing. There are lots of issues that face carers. One of them is pay, but one of them in the islands is the sheer distances they are having to travel, because in many communities there's not a workforce of younger people to recruit from. That comes back down to lots of interlinked issues around housing and other things in the islands, amongst other things. The health service is clearly under pressure, as it is across the UK. The longest waits are consistently coming down. The number of operations is consistently going up. We are still trying to cope with 2 years where non-essential operations were essentially not taking place, but there is big progress on all of those fronts. And also it's worth saying that Scotland is a country where prescriptions are free, which we sometimes forget is not the case in other parts of the UK. On dentists, you'll have seen the First Minister when he was in the island a couple of weeks ago committing in our manifesto £750,000 specifically for dental services in the Western Isles, which I absolutely accept sorely in need of recruitment. There are lots of good things happening in the islands too, not least the big new scanner in the hospital in Stornoway. On the point about funding, well, we spend in Scotland more on the NHS than we do on all other areas of public services added together. That's as it should be. That's how important it is to the country. But the point stands, and it's been made by others, that we live in a UK environment of austerity that's been inherited from government to government, and that's not going to change until we get control in Scotland over our own economy and our own finances. On the point about reform, yes, Nigel Farage did say he wanted to privatise the National Health Service, and that might not make much difference to him as a multi-millionaire, but it does to everyone else.
Thank you. Then we go to Donald for Labour.
Thanks. The NHS is in the Labour Party's DNA. We delivered the NHS and set it up, and I think continuing with an NHS that's free at the point of use is absolutely crucial. But for too many people in Scotland just now who are languishing on NHS waiting lists, they're having to turn to private healthcare for routine operations that they should have been able to access through the National Health Service. That's a national scandal, and it's something that we need to tackle and deal with now. So Scottish Labour would declare a national waiting times emergency and create national waiting lists so that we make sure that people, instead of languishing on these waiting lists in pain, not getting the treatment they need, they would go wherever in the country is available to get the treatment that they need. We also need to make sure that we're delivering as many services as we can locally in this community. We've seen too many services eroded over recent years throughout our islands, and we need to make sure that as many of them as possible are delivered here where that's safe to do so. I'd also touch on a point that some others made around delayed discharge. Our health board regularly has the highest rates of delayed discharge of anywhere in Scotland, and that's a real serious issue, and as others have mentioned, that does relate to problems around social care. We need to invest in social care and make sure that we're creating the care packages available and the home care beds available to make sure that we get those delayed discharge rates down. And I'd quite like to see Kenneth and Alistair's working on how Independence is going to deliver this massive investment in our NHS, but I think we're waiting a while for that.
Okay, we'll pass on to George, thank you.
Yes, thank you. I think the structural problem here is there are just many more old people over 70 who are getting ill. When the NHS was set up, was in the 50s and 60s. You got to about 60, and then you dropped dead about 62. But now, thankfully, everyone's living longer. But obviously, we've got to fund this area. And I think Scottish Conservatives are looking at wielding the claymore to a lot of quangos there. There is a lot of bureaucracy in the NHS that can be trimmed back. 1 in 6 people's on a waiting list. Certainly as Scottish Conservatives, we want to focus on a couple of areas. One is frontline services for doctors, trying to get within the next term of Parliament a maximum 48 hours waiting time for an appointment with your local GP. And then also we're focusing on, and I'm afraid I've lost my place there, yes, generally just trying to improve, certainly for the Western Isles. Some recent freedom of information requests came out on the amount that was spent on locum doctors, and it was about £1 million a year in the last few years. That's something that we can fix if we recruit doctors who are going to stick around properly.
Okay, Malcolm till last, because
this is a special one for me.
Because there was a particular end to that question, which was about Reform UK's approach to privatisation.
Yes. Well, I would put it a different way around. I think Donald alluded to it. I've seen various folk. One who wasn't managing to work still isn't managing to work, but struggling with her health. And she goes to the doctor, and the doctor said, well, yes, we can get you an appointment, but it's at least 6 months. Now that person's off work, not able to be productive, not able to do the job, which is a caring role. So she went private. Then another one who was needing a reversal operation, struggling to work with it, managing just about, but 2 years was the minimum. Now, that is neither a service that is free at the point of need, nor is it run by the NHS. It's a totally random privatisation of the NHS. So, how is Reform going to avoid it being privatised, is the way I would ask it. I think that a lot of there is the opportunity to use private companies, particularly in the bed blocking area, because a night in hospital is about £600 and £200 would do for those that are well enough to be out of hospital. That takes a lot of people out of the system. A lot of quangos, there's a lot of quangos and waste that could be taken out, but also the tax system avoids, well, the way it's tiered, that could be reduced because there's a lot of people working, a lot of doctors and things who are working to hold their hours back so that they can't, so they don't fall into the very highest tax brackets where they're no better off. So that would free up there's theatres and things that are not being used at weekends and things like that. They could be staffed. But looking after carers, I've been a foster carer for about 25 years. they don't know how to look after carers. I can tell you that for sure. I remember asking for nappies. We're saving them $250,000 a year, and they would not give us disposable nappies to help. You know, that's the sort of thing. Some of this stuff is very basic. You know, if you pay carers, family carers who are willing to do it enough to allow them to stay at home, that's a lot cheaper than having somebody in a care home, and it's a lot better place to be. So the other thing is shortage of staff. A lot of the stuff in the NHS here particularly is recruiting staff and keeping staff. This place needs good ferries, good roads, good internet, and all the services that go with that.
But that sounded like a summary up for me. Thank you. We'll
Yes,
move on to
yes, no, that's grand. That's grand. Thank you.
Okay, well, we are getting dangerously close to the time that we said the meeting would finish. Several hands have gone up. Gentlemen here, if you would like to wait for the microphone.
That's good. Hi, I'm Asper. My name's Steve. I think there's a couple of things I want to say. I just want to say that we need to be truthful about our services. Some of our services, like my son is a qualified doctor. We have loads of doctors leaving because they can't get work here. I work with 2 nurses who only can get 2 shifts a week here, but they're working in Tesco the rest of the time. And that's local issues, what we should be ashamed of. But we have qualified people cannot get their shifts here.
Okay.
But the other question...
Do you have a question?
Yeah, the other question, what nobody's mentioned, you all mentioned about housing, about people leaving the island. The biggest issue is transport. I don't mean ferries, local transport. Shifts, lots of people, where I live, 100 people go there.
So what's the question? If you'd like to move to your question.
My question is transport. Nobody's mentioned transport, and that's the biggest issue, employment, housing.
Okay, well let's turn that into a question. So there's an issue, some of these issues would be addressed by improved transport, and you mean inter-island, within the island transport.
Full stop, yeah, for people getting to employment, not
Yeah,
people can't
okay.
get to employment.
Well, let's see if anybody would like to respond to that. Is inter-island transport something that parties would want to respond to? We'll take Jamie first. I'm not going to make this a complete round robin because I think we need to move on. But
I think inter-island transport is of fundamental importance to the long-term future of the island. It really has to change. And we have this ridiculous situation at the present moment. If you're a pregnant mother in US, you have to come and live in hire accommodation in Stornoway for a month around your term date. And the reality of that is, it's not just you that comes. You have to bring your older children with you too, because there's nobody else to look after them, and probably your husband as well. And that is the sort of thing which could be considerably ameliorated, if not fixed, by putting in a fixed link across the Sound of Harris. There was a plan for a fixed link about 6 years ago, I think it was. The money that was hoped for actually went to build a retail development just north of Fort William, and we didn't get it. But a fixed link which would join the Southern Isles to Lewis and Harris would make a huge difference to the integration of, not just in all respects of the population, but particularly the integration of health aspects. And I think it's a really, really serious problem, which has not really been properly highlighted.
okay, thank you. Alistair, you wanted to come back on it?
Yeah, just on the initial point about buses, I mean, I sympathise with the point that's been made. I regularly used to have in my job that people coming to me complaining about bus service. In some areas it's got to the point where people can't get to their shifts, can't get to their work. I suppose what's the Scottish Government doing on that? Well, for a start, you'll see that we're part of the pilot area for a £2 cap on bus fares. So the Scottish Government is certainly supporting bringing the cost of bus fares down. The bigger challenge, one you're pointing to, is hopefully using that to drive the actual provision and the actual better timetable that will make life better for people.
Okay, does anybody else want to come in on that? Right, Donald, you're coming.
If I can just come in briefly on that, I think that availability of a bus service across the islands is absolutely key, and we've seen that deteriorate over every time the contract is renewed. We've seen the timetable get worse. And I would just link that back again to core funding and the funding situation that we've had there. You can't have that structural improvement in it without properly resourcing the local authority.
Okay, unless anybody really wants to come in on that, I'm going to move on to another question. Are we happy with that? Okay. Is this a question? Okay. Is it a short question?
Yeah.
Good. Great.
I just wondered if all of you are aware of the local councillor in Barra who's taken the report to the Scottish Government about the Western Isles Health Board, and what your thoughts are on that and what you might want to do. DOI, I'm an NHS whistleblower. I have had my life destroyed by raising issues on patient safety, so I have huge sympathy for the number of doctors, dentists, nurses, consultants and others who have been driven off these islands by the health board, and I can name them if you would want me to. Some of them would mind, some of them would. So that's my question. My question is, it's all very well going on about recruitment, but there's no point recruiting if when they come here their lives are made a misery and they're driven off the island. Some of them to die.
You asked a question which was, are the candidates aware of the activities in Barra and what they would want to do in response to that? So there's some nods here. Who would like to respond to that? Alistair, this is one for you to start with.
Yes, I am aware of what the councillor has raised in Barra, and if I'm cagey about it, it's because I know some of the people concerned, they don't particularly want to be named. If they do, I can't name them without their permission. But I am aware of the case, he has raised these things with me. Obviously, whistleblowers have rights, but I can't start talking about individual people's individual healthcare on this platform, I'm afraid.
Okay, thank you. Anybody else want to come in on that? Malcolm, you want to come in?
Yes, I am aware of it, and it's not a very nice situation at all that a lot of folk have found themselves in. A lot of it is, I think, having probably too many people involved between everybody, and it gets dropped in places. But again, it's you talk about looking after the doctors. I've been involved with fostering for a long time. Bringing up issues is not a very easy thing to do. It costs you. That's why I know so many lawyers and courts and police and goodness knows what else. When you bring up these issues, and there can easily be a culture of hiding things, shoving things under the carpet, from pressure, especially as you quite often know the folk you're having to cause trouble for as well. I think it's something that we need to be aware of, and more people need to be aware of. When I was going around for a while back, one of the main things that came up was bullying in the council. So
okay, thank you. You've responded to the question.
Right, that's fine.
Right. We'll just pick that. Does anybody else want to come in on the particular questions that we were asking? Okay, thank you. We're going to move on. We're now at that time of night that you've all been waiting for, which is the question about the Guga, which has slightly less resonance in Borve than if we were holding this meeting a wee bit further northeast than here, but it's still obviously very important. Even people in Borve have cousins who come from Borve and go out to hunt the Guga. And since this is going to be seen throughout the civilised world over the next few years on YouTube, it might be an idea to explain what a Guga is and why anybody would want to hunt it. As a vegetarian, I don't feel qualified to do that. I'm going to ask a question about the Guga Hunt, and it's not a trivial one. It's something that is important to people. We've already heard some reference to it and to the issues being raised in Edinburgh. The question that has been put forward by somebody in advance of the meeting is, the first one is a very straightforward question. What is your position on the Guga harvest? And then it says, if elected, what specific steps would you take in the next Parliament to make a strong stand for our island community. So they don't really want to know what your position is. They already have determined that you're going to be in support of it, and they want to know what you're going to do about it, and to seek support and protection for the harvest. So it's a much longer question than that, but there's two parts to it. What's your position? And if elected, what specific steps, or would you take specific steps to make a strong stand for this particular aspect of our island community? And we'll start with Labour and Tom McKinnon to answer that.
Thank you. Yes, very much in support of the Guga Hunt. I think it's a well-regulated activity. Nature Scott issues the licence when it's applied for, and I understand that the bag limit has been reduced in recent years, very carefully managed. And I also understand that the highest standards of animal welfare are maintained by the hunters as well in the exercise of the hunt. I think it's been quite, I mean, the hunt has been targeted in the past by activists, but I think this recent one has been particularly unsavoury and quite distressing for the community and for the people who have been specifically targeted by it, and that's something for, I think, everyone to reflect on. I think in terms of what I would do going forward, I think there's a really important point about awareness raising here and helping people who maybe haven't encountered this before, who don't know about it, who don't know about the cultural significance and the importance of it, to make them aware of it. And that's other MSPs in the Scottish Parliament, and that's in public bodies as well, and making sure that the public actually understand how important this is to the community here. And I think it also speaks to a problem that we have in society now, and a disconnect with where food comes from. People expect food to come in a packet on the shelves, but it doesn't. It has to originate from somewhere. I'm a crofter. I produce sheep, and they enter the food chain. I don't see much difference between a lamb being raised in a croft and a cougar being taken from Solskjaer. And I'll certainly be a strong voice and advocate for the continuation of the hunt in the next Parliament, if elected.
Okay, George, would you like to?
Thanks very much. I mean, I'm definitely pro-hunting it and pro-protecting it. I don't think the two should be exclusive. You know, what the men of Ness are doing is, you know, keeping a close eye on that population. On a lighter note, certainly in other parts of Scotland there is a big issue with vicious gulls stealing people's fish suppers. Maybe we could invite the men of Ness to Inverness and Nairn to take on some of the vicious gulls there.
Okay.
Yeah, well, I think Donald put it quite well. You know, you think of it's been a tradition for a long time. It kept a lot of people alive over the years. I mean, if the ferries stopped sailing, you know, what could we say? But, you know, I mean, even if you look at it nature-wise, the guys who go out make a clean job of it. They look after the birds. It's done humanely. Slaughterhouses, any animals that are taken in are usually very aware of it. That's our normal day-to-day stuff. And the other alternative is that 70% of them actually die mostly of starvation before they reach adulthood. The alternative's not that great, you know. But I think in Holyrood is awareness. Awareness needs to be raised. It's cultural. It's how people have done it. I mean, even to home slaughter, it's a thing that, you know, is part of how the culture has been over the years. And yeah, absolutely. Don't let them take it away.
Okay, and Kenneth, for the Alliance to Liberate Scotland Party and the Guga.
Well, I think local traditions should be protected just the same way as Gaelic language is now protected. Other languages, communities rely on the traditions, and without traditions, you're just all strangers, and the community dies. If you don't protect local traditions, local languages, there is no community.
Okay, Jamie, come in, the Liberal Democrat view on the Guga.
Well, the Liberal Democrats do not have a view on the Guga Hunt because
I'm astonished to hear that.
the policy of the Liberal Democrats has made it in conferences, and the subject of the Guga has never been brought to a conference. So it is very much a matter of what I would do about Guga. And what I would do about Guga is let the guys in Nest get on with what they've been doing forever and ever and ever, and keep on going. As somebody else said, it's properly regulated, and I think we should get on with it.
Okay, thank you. And Alistair, the last word on the Guga.
I think the only reason we all smiled when Guga was mentioned wasn't because it wasn't important, but because I think we had a kind of sweepstakes that when Guga would be mentioned. And I think, much as people smile about it in some places, I think it's a serious issue, because the misunderstanding that has been propagated by that guy who dresses up as a Gaelic and shouts at me outside the Scottish Parliament is considerable. And it's not entirely innocent either, because it has got to the stage now of decrying people in Lewis, making statements hostile to people in Lewis. It's got to the point of making statements really hostile about the people in Nature Scott doing their jobs. And it's really out of hand. He's standing, I believe, in Edinburgh Central, where I'm sure Guga is an issue on everyone's lips in this election. But I will support Guga Hunt, and I'll say so in Parliament if you like.
Well, you can see a lot of Guga on the Bass Rock, so anybody in Edinburgh is probably familiar with them. For the record, Guga is a baby Gaelic, and every August a small group of people go out from Port of Ness and they bring back what used to be 2,000 of these baby Gaelics. Now it's much reduced harvest, and it is obviously an important cultural tradition. It's not quite what Frank Fraser-Darling said. When he was sailing out to Rona, the next rock on from Sugaskir, and between the two world wars, he turned to his wife and said, "We're going past Port of Ness. If they weren't able to hunt the Guga, they would have to survive off corned beef for the whole of the winter." So that puts it in perspective, sure. So I think we were now well after 8:30, which is a surprise to me, and maybe to yourselves as well. I think we probably ought to wrap up at that point. I'm going to get a steer from the media team. Should we? Yeah, I think we should. Oh, hang on.
Just very, very quickly, can I make a comment after?
Would you wait for the mic?
Oh, sorry.
Hurry up then, land on the mic. Come on.
Yeah, thank you very much, Chair. As somebody that has been on the harvest for a number of years, till I got to the stage where it started to, affect my full-time job, I can categorically say to everybody in here, that if I thought for 1 minute that the harvest was something that was along the lines of what this individual was talking about, I would be the first person to stand in line and stop it. But I can categorically guarantee you it is not like that at all. Okay? I grew up with it, and I went across there in 2021, and there was 10 young, fit men, categories being. They worked the socks off. Okay? Hard physical work, and I would always support it. And that's why I want to just make a comment that I can't believe I actually sat in front of a panel of 6 politicians or would-be politicians, and they all agreed on something.
Well, that's
my
Okay, well, we are going to wrap up now. I'm sorry if there are burning questions that we haven't got to. There are still another 11 questions on my list, and they weren't all about the Guga, they were about the whole range of very important issues. But interestingly, I think we have, in the course of the evening, covered most of them, if not all of them, and not necessarily in the detail which they appeared there. So I'm going to thank all of the candidates here. This is one of 3 hustings. Obviously, being where it is, this is the most important one, and the one that is going to have most bearing to the ultimate result in the elections on May the 7th. I'm delighted that we've had such a good audience here and such a range of ages. We've got a very young person at the front here who I'm sure we'll see on the stage in another 15, 20 years, taking on this role. We look forward to seeing you there. And thank you for the questions that came here. If you feel that I've shortchanged you, then that's just the way it is. I'm in charge this evening, I'm afraid, and that's how it has to be. So perhaps you just say thank you to the candidates for coming out this evening.